My name is Drew Johnson. I am the key accounts manager for New York State. Kind of the idea here, I'm sure you guys have done a couple of these. I really don't want to talk at you too much, but we kind of want this to be a collaborative effort. Just wanted to very quickly go over a little bit about whiskey just in general, very briefly, go over the category a bit of American Single Malt, because I know it's something a lot of people don't have a lot of experience with. And then, of course, a bit about our production methods, and then talk some awesome whiskey. Sound good, everybody? Without further ado, I suppose I'll jump right in. American Single Malt whiskey. So let's get started here. So what does single malt mean globally, right? So I'm sure all of you are very familiar with Scottish single malts, Irish, Japanese, all these really old methods. So single malt whiskey is the original whiskey. It was made over 1,000 years ago by monks in Ireland first, then Scotland, which is a bit contended, but the history books show Ireland was the first to start making it. 100% barley malt dried using wood fire, sometimes using peat moss as well. Usually distilled at one facility, usually aged and blended at that one distillery, and usually using copper pot stills and aged in oak barrels for a certain amount of time. Usually there's an age statement somewhere involved in the bottle. We don't really want to harp too much on that because we're not really talking about Scotch or things done overseas. We wanted to talk about what's happening here in America. So where is it typically made? These countries I just listed. Cool. So whiskey in the United States, just like very general. Barley was the main grain used in Europe to distill for many, many years. But early attempts, when early European settlers came over to the Americas, early attempts to grow English two-row barley malt failed for the most part because the Northeast and even going into the breadbasket, they found it to be kind of hard, and the climate and the soil didn't agree with that particular variety of barley. So, what was readily available was a whole lot of corn and rye. So naturally, they took a lot of the distilling methods used overseas and started using rye and corn as the base grain to make whiskey. Hence, rye and bourbon were born. Westward expansion later down the line, not to slip in our brand in there too directly, but westward expansion kind of led to opening up new microclimates, and they found that out west, like all up the West Coast in California and also Oregon and Washington, found to be really great places to grow barley. Actually, nowadays, over 60% of all the barley grown in the United States is grown in the Pacific Northwest. So where we're located in Portland makes for a great place to make single malt. A brief history of American Single Malt itself. So American Single Malt was actually born in Portland, Oregon, just down the road from Westward's distillery at Steve McCarthy's Clear Creek Distilling. It was born in about 1996, which is kind of crazy if you think about the history of all spirits in the world. Like I just said, Scotch has been around forever. I mean, they've been making all kinds of different distillates in Asia and across Europe and all over the world for, better part of centuries, decades. This category has been around since the 90s. So it's in its true infancy. This is kind of like the forefront of a category that is brand new. So pretty cool, pretty exciting. For almost 10 years, McCarthy stood kind of by itself. There were significant barriers to get in, for other distilleries to get into the category, kind of predominantly the fact that it didn't really have a whole lot of market, and the product itself took a lot of money to make. It was very expensive. Barley malt is much more expensive than corn and rye. It also has a slightly lower yield as far as sugar's going. So it really is a more expensive product to make. I mean, this is why a lot of the single malts globally are coveted, because it is, through and through a much more costly process. Until the 2000s, where demand started driving wider experimentation amongst a couple of different micro distilleries. Until very recently, any American whiskey containing 51% malted barley could carry the name malt whiskey, and then distilleries could just use single at will. So basically, we really wanted to just iron out a way that American single malt as a category had standards of production, and you couldn't make American single malt anywhere in the world or anywhere in the country and just call it that, especially when you might not be using 100% barley. because it's not a single malt at that point. So the foundation of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission happened to try and set forth some of those guidelines. It was founded in 2016, comprised of over 100 American distilleries actually make American Single Malt these days, spearheaded by only a handful of distilleries, Westward being one of them. A couple others are Balcones, Virginia Distilling Co., Westland, which is just north of us in Seattle. And like I just said, their collective goal was to just set forth uniform standards of production for American Single Malt as a category. With the US government, we are very, very happy to say, very recently, we just got certified by the TTB, which is the US government, the Tax and Trade Bureau, as an official category. We've been fighting for that for a very long time, since before the foundation of this commission. So this is a huge step forward for the category, and really kind of like drives home that this is a real new thing in whiskey. So these are our TTB certification guidelines, which are pretty cool, but pretty flexible. So by law, it will be mandated that to be called American Single Malt, it must be made from 100% barley malt. Must be made at one distillery. You have to distill yourself. You can't outsource your juice. Mashed, distilled, and matured all within the 50 United States. Matured in 700-liter or smaller oak casks. You'll note that it doesn't actually say fresh oak barrels, so I'll get to that in 1 second. Distilled to no more than 160 proof, so 80% ABV off the still, and then bottled at no less than 80 proof. So you have to hit at least 80 proof or 40 ABV to be called American Single Malt. So, we wanted to keep these open. We wanted to have wiggle room for experimentation between distilleries. We didn't want to be super restrictive as to what you can do. So you notice the barrel size, but not fresh barrels. It doesn't dictate exactly where the barrels have to come from. It also doesn't dictate minimum time in barrels or an age statement on the bottle or anything like that. So, bourbon has a little bit more strict guidelines, but this one, we really didn't want to kind of shackle anybody's hands. We really wanted to be able to open the door up for experimentation, but still have, defined guidelines for what American Single Malt could be called. So some of the major producers, I won't get too into this, but a couple of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission founders, but then we also have, Clear Creek on here, Virginia Distilling. These are the only real big nationally distributed brands that are doing American Single Malt right now. And just kind of a funny caveat to the certification that we actually just achieved. Right after that certification got pushed through a lot of hard work of the people on the screen right now. We're not mad at them or anything, but a bunch of the bigger, kind of William Grant and Sons and Sazerac and, Jack Daniels, for instance, is releasing as an American Single Malt within 2023. We actually love that. Brings more awareness to the category, but it's kind of funny that all these smaller guys push this through, and then right after that we got some big heavy hitters in the category now. So the main event, we were founded in 2004 by our master blender and distiller Christian Krogstad, and our CEO Tom Mooney. That's Christian on the left side of the screen with the shaggy hair, and Tom on the right. Production, that's our cute distillery right there in Southeast Portland. Those are our two tasting rooms and a shot of our distillery. We actually have one at Portland Airport, which is kind of cool. If you guys are ever passing through, you can stop by and get some delicious Westward whiskey. Our mashing process, so it's brewed like a pale ale. The reason for that, we decided we wanted to make everything, we wanted to do everything like a brewery would do. I'll just say Christian had a long past in brewing before he ever started really commercially distilling. He had been working for numerous breweries, and he had always kind of wondered why they didn't bring more of that methodology into the distillery, considering that a lot of the mash bills and a lot of the wash that comes through during the distillation process starts out as essentially a beer. So he was like, why don't we kind of bring more of those elevated and more thoughtful elements of brewing into the washing or into the mashing process of a distillate. So that was his thought process. We start with malting. We get all this. The one thing that we don't do in-house, we're a grain to glass operation through and through. except for the fact that we don't malt, which is a little more unconventional considering that like the biggest single malt category on the planet is Scotch. And generally speaking, the malting floors are right next to the distillery. We don't think that that's necessary. We started with this particular malt for a lot of reasons. So we get everything from Great Western Malting Company. It is located in Vancouver, Washington, so just north of us. Like honestly, I was out in Portland for a work trip, and we drove up to the malting house, and it was about 15, 20 minutes away from the distillery. So really close to us. They truck it right down. We get all of our barley that we use in the distillery from less than 100 miles around the distillery. There's so much barley grown in the Pacific Northwest that we're able to get all of that barley from local farms, which is really, really, really awesome. 100% two-row malt, which is a brewer's malt actually, as opposed to a six-row barley malt, which is usually reserved for distilling. It has a little bit less of a sugar yield. This is a brewer's malt that's a little bit more expensive, but has a lot more concentrated starches on each row of barley, which is pretty cool. Sourced sustainably from local farms, blah, 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 blah. I already said that. 1,000%, 100% natural gas kiln roasted. So there's no wood fire involved, no peat, no wood fire. This is a gas kiln oven. That guy standing there is actually in the oven. That's what the oven looks like, believe it or not. Cool. So the barley malt arrives on site. We mill it at the distillery. This is a shot of our brewery. You can see everything there is commercially from a brewery. That's a brewer's mash tun and bright tanks. Not really seen that often in this particular light in most distilleries. This is definitely a little bit unconventional. More shots of our brewery, more of those cool bright tanks. So we do something else that's really unusual. Because we're doing all the steps that a brewery would do, we aren't sour mashing, which is really weird. I think we're about one of 6 distilleries in the entire country that don't use sour mash. So if you're unfamiliar, which I'm sure most of you understand this process, but just for the sake of being thorough, sour mash, you use your old mash, your old wash that has some live but mostly dormant yeast. You take some of that mash and you throw it in with the new batch, which kicks off fermentation again. We don't do that. We actually use a fresh yeast starter every time, like a brewery would do. That yeast starter is actually a Chico Pale Ale yeast strain, the same one that Sierra Nevada Brewing Co. uses for their pale ale. So you've probably had this yeast before if you've ever had like a Sierra Nevada brew in any regard. Cool. Spent barley, getting ready to ship over to those local farms. Pretty cool. And there's our pale ale. So that's our master blender, actually. So Christian is the master distiller. That's our master blender. Miles Monroe, he is the boots on the ground most of the time. Christian is a man of the world. He goes around a lot. He's in the distillery all the time. But Miles is the guy who's really there pretty much day in, day out, managing the distillery and the rickhouse. He's our go-to guy. That's him tasting our pale ale. You can see it's a super rich wash. It looks almost exactly like a pale ale. We do everything that they would do for that beer except for add the hops, obviously. So no hops involved. And then we move it to distillation. So distilled like a scotch. We have these 2 big stills here. The one on the left is our main still. It's 3,000 gallon. That's our low wine still that is all copper. The silver at the bottom there is actually just insulation. We call him Stilly Nelson. It is 3,000 gallons. Like I said, it's the largest copper pot still west of the Mississippi. It's a giant still. And then on the right there, that is Whiskey Houston. She is our smaller 700 gallon custom low reflux finishing spirit still. So we distill first in that big one, and then we run through the low reflux still over there on the right. You can see this cool little guy up top here. I don't want to get really too into it because I'm terrible at explaining reflux. Reflux is a really complicated situation, chemistry speaking. Basically, as you distill, those ethanol vapors are going up the still along with a bunch of other chemical compounds. We don't want all those chemical compounds. A lot of them are heavier than the ethanol. So when it goes up this nice little condenser right here, it's like a micro condenser. That's the low reflux condenser. It's packed with a ton of copper mesh. And essentially all the vapors are sticking to that, kind of recondensing and then dripping back down in the still, then evaporating again, then dropping down, then back and forth. so on and so forth. So you're getting actually sort of like multiple runs of distillation within this guy, sort of like a column still, but not exactly, because it is still a pot still. So we get a couple of extra little runs of distillation here that just help to pull out all those horrible conjugars and all that like sulfur and all that unwanted chemicals that we don't want in the finished whiskey, because obviously those are off-putting. If you guys don't know, that's kind of the reason for copper. It pulls out sulfur and a bunch of other chemicals that we don't want in our whiskey. So hence the reason why we have this pretty cool low reflux condenser attached to the smaller spirit still. So those are the heads, tails, and hearts getting pulled out of our little jewel box there. There is our sweet, sweet whiskey Jesus, tasting some or smelling some hearts and heads and tails. So the process of distillation, our first run goes through the 3,000 gallon still. It comes off the known as low wine, comes off at about 25% ABV. The low wines then moved into that smaller spirit still, still blah, blah, blah with those copper condensers. Once cut, the hearts come out of the spirit still at around 70% alcohol, so pretty high, 140 proof. A hydrometer is used to bring it down to about 125 proof, about 62.5 before hitting the barrels and then heading to the rick house. Sometimes they hit the barrels a little bit higher than 125. It's somewhere between 125 and 130. Fill those barrels, boys. Cool. Maturation, aged like a bourbon. So that's Jenny. That's our whiskey warehouse or our rick house, a very brooding miles on the right. It's called Jenny because it's simply on Jenny Street, but that's what everybody calls it, Jenny. These are virgin low char American white oak, which probably sound pretty familiar to you. All of those things are very similar to what bourbon is aged in. So our barrels are sourced from the Missouri Ozarks, coopered at Independence Stave in Lebanon, Missouri. And if any of you guys out there love bourbon, I'm sure you probably have heard this name before. Independence Stave has a couple of different cooperages around the U.S., and they make an enormous amount of barrels, almost entirely, not entirely, but almost entirely for bourbon production. That's where a lot of the big guys get their barrels from. We actually use low char barrels, char 2, char 3. We don't have that crazy crocodile char like bourbon would have. I don't know that there's a whole lot of bourbons aging in chars this low, but we have our reasoning behind it. They wanted to cut through some of the sort of like grain whiskey, notes, like some of the really intense grain notes of our whiskey, and add some of those nice kind of like sweeter maple and vanilla notes to it. So that's kind of one reason why we use char 2, char 3. Our whiskey is aged 4 to 6 years. That may not seem like a long time, but those of you who know bourbon probably know that a lot of bourbons aren't aged a whole lot longer than that because of those virgin barrels. When you use fresh white oak, especially in a temperature like Portland, where there's not a whole lot of temperature fluctuation, you're getting a lot of oak on that juice in a very short amount of time. So 4 to 6 years, when you think about single malt, may not seem like a lot, but when you think about an American whiskey, it's a pretty accurate number. The final product of our original flagship expression is a blend of about 20 to 25 barrels, depending on the batch. So, we go through the rick house, we'll blend together a couple of barrels just to make a consistent product. And everything at this point, because we're a pretty small place, is hand bottled. Those are the real heroes, doing the job that, it's got to be day in, day out. They're nonstop labeling. So let's taste.
Before we go to taste, obviously bourbon, this is not your first rodeo when it comes to whiskey, I'm assuming, but do you guys actually know the effect of different char levels on the taste? Like, if I'm preaching to the choir, just tell me, but the higher the char, the more crevices there are within the barrel itself. It just gets toasted longer, right? So like, for example, char 4 would be toasted for about 55 seconds to a minute. And so it creates a lot more crevices in the wood. So whiskey gets stuck there essentially, and then it creates more of an interaction with the wood. So the theory is it's going to take after the wood more, the higher the char is. And where people don't want that to happen, then they use the lower char levels. And there is the whole science behind it, and there's really no right answer to it. It's just every distillery kind of knows what the sweet spot for them is. And so it's interesting. Every time we do a barrel pick, people keep asking me what the char is. And in the beginning, it was like, what the hell difference does it make? But then you kind of understand why people are asking. And especially if you don't know the distillery and it's the first, it's your first rodeo with them, so to speak. So that's the other, and I said it, this is interactive, because this Westward whiskey is sweet mash. Can somebody tell me other, at least top 3 sweet mash whiskeys out there? Should be easy.
Fearless.
Okay. Yeah, Fearless is one. What else? There's a big one.
Wilderness Trail.
Yes, correct. There's also Even Williams, Wild Turkey, Jim Beam, I think, is a sweet mash as well. Anyway, all right, enough of that. Let's next.
Yeah, of course, guys. Well, I really appreciate you guys sitting through that. I know that was like not exactly the shortest little demo, but I hope you guys found that like kind of fun and informative. I'm gonna get rid of my background here. Put up a bottle.
As you are, I'm going to read another question for you.
Please.
Is every Westward storing in new oak barrels? And why the new oak barrels when ASM leaves the option to do, to be basically to use all of them, not just new?
So yes, every single Westward whiskey starts out in virgin American oak. The reason for that is pretty simple. As you guys taste through these, you'll find it abundantly clear we're setting out to make a distinctly American whiskey. We want this to drink something in the vein of bourbon, rye, blah, blah, blah. This is an American whiskey. We are not imitating anything happening overseas. This is something truly found in the United States. And, aging in those virgin American oak barrels, you'll see in just a second. I mean, the flavor profile of this is right on the mark for an American juice. So that was the idea. I mean, we didn't have to. It's a really good question. God knows it's not cheap. So we just wanted to make an American whiskey. Yeah, that's basically it. All right, let's try our first guy. So this is our Westward. This is our flagship, the blue label, the one that doesn't have any other designations like cask strength or, barrel finishes. This is just the original. This is the backbone for all of our expressions. Everything that you guys have starts with this. This is basically that entire slideshow about production, for the most part, pertains to this particular expression here. So this guy, right off the bat, I mean, the nose is just nuts. I mean, I immediately just get an enormous amount of super lush fruit. That's like the first thing I get. It's fruity. It's fruity. I get a little bit of vanilla, kind of brown sugar. But yeah, and then I also observe, I mean, before I even take a sip, I mean, the legs. This is just, the body on this whiskey is intense. I mean, this is a very oily, relatively heavy whiskey.
What notes are you guys getting? Similar to what Drew's talking about? I'm definitely getting the floral and the brown sugar now, for sure.
Yeah.
And
a little bit of
tropical,
lavender.
Mango, electric pineapple, those fruit flavors are beautiful.
Yep.
Super fruity for sure. Hey, what's the proof? Did I miss that?
You did not. My apologies. I should have thrown that in the slideshow somewhere. 90 proof. So this guy here is 90.
Do you chill filter your whiskeys?
Nope. No, sir. Yeah, no filtering. No chill filtering. No artificial colorants, no additives, nothing like that. I kind of figured you guys would gather that, but I feel like I have to say it because unfortunately the world's filled with a lot of spirits with nonsense in them.
So this is interesting. The first time we did this, Drew, majority of the people on a line didn't have any experience with American Single Malts. This group right here is completely opposite of that. Majority of the people actually do have experience with American Single Malt. So for the people that just voted yes, do you mind sharing what brands have you tasted in this category?
Hey, just to be completely transparent, I only had tried one because you brought it up, and it's a Westward.
Okay.
And it's the cask strength, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
I
we're gonna get
bought
to the
it
cast
for
strength.
you. Super good, but that's the only ones I've ever had is what I just tried now and that one.
Thanks, John. Anybody else? I'm just kind of curious as to like what your point of reference is, because it's important. Yeah. Westland?
Virginia Distilling.
Okay. Makes sense.
And I had the Laws Whiskey's single American Single Malt not too long ago. And then there's a local distillery here in Minnesota called Danfork that has been making an American Single Malt, and they've had three total batches so far. One was like a pick for a local store, and they're all great, and they don't have a core single malt that they've released. Everything has been a finished, and they've used California red wine and a PX Oloroso for the two different ones. So, and they're really small, so like no one's ever really heard of them before, but they are just absolutely fantastic. So if you're in Minnesota and looking for a good American Single Malt, go to Danfork. Sorry. Now I'll stop advertising for local.
No. Please. I would love for these guys to come out with like an Oloroso or PX cask, but I don't know that they ever will. Who knows? They might for their whiskey club, but they really do like to try and steer away from most norms, so to speak. And I know that, like, obviously sherry cask single malt is nothing new. So, but I mean, there's a reason why so many places do it. I mean, it's freaking awesome.
Right.
So
The marriage of those two. Yeah, the marriage of those two is just kind of like, made in heaven.
This would be, and this, how, like, Michael, how awesome would this be? Like, with an Oloroso cask. I mean, it'd be freaking awesome. Like, there's no way it would.
We don't want to have another episode of what happened last time, where people like got a whiff that you guys are experimenting with this stuff, and they started asking for all kinds of crazy finishes. So we just keep it within the confines of this call. Yeah.
That's fair.
But I'm glad like people are commenting in chat and they're putting all kinds of different producers. I mean, in Westward, yes, Stranahan's for sure. Balcones, yeah. So those are your usual suspects. There's another one which is for the longest time was my personal favorite, was Hill Rock, and that's the one in upstate New York, and they do all kinds of stuff. And single malt is for me, it's their best whiskey. But anyway, the reason I asked is because they're not all the same. Like much like bourbon isn't all the same, these American single malts isn't all the same. Like all of that stuff that Drew was talking about in his presentation matters. And many distilleries approach it differently, and that you can taste it, and that's the proof is in the pudding. Cool. What do you guys think about this first expression? And mind you, this is not cask strength. This is just a regular expression you can readily pick up in your local store. On a scale 0 to 10, what do you think? It's okay, you're not going to offend them.
10. No, I'm just kidding. I don't make it. I don't care.
No,
Okay.
it's really good, really good. 1 to 10. I'm a bit biased, Michael, as you know, I'm a cask strength guy, but
Yeah, you are.
I mean, it's a 6, 7, but it just lacks a little bit of what I like. But other than that, it's really
Which
good.
is what?
Very
Which is
good.
what? A punch, right? That's what you like.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I like just a little more. You get a little more flavor, a little more finish, and a little more punch. But hey, it's crushable. Just like I
Right.
said about the highway,
Correct.
crushable. It's so
Correct.
good. Yeah.
Correct. And I didn't do any favors by asking this right off the bat, because usually the first sample you taste becomes your reference point. And then when we do the barrel picks, by the way, for those of you that haven't done it with us, we always go back to the first one, because that's kind of sets up your palate, and then you go through it and then you taste it again and like, oh, in comparison to everything else you just tasted, it might taste better. So anyway, you guys want to move on to the second one?
Right. So next up, I recommend you guys move on to the Pinot Noir, the cask finish. Like I said, everything that we do is based off that original expression. So all those things that I talked about, the sweet mash, the blah, 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 and then, aged and matured in those virgin American white oak barrels for 4 to 6 years. For this guy, we take that juice and then we move it over to French oak barrels that have been seasoned previously with Pinot Noir. We really wanted to showcase the winemaking heritage of Oregon. Oregon makes an enormous amount of Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley. So we decided to partner with a couple of vineyards down there, mostly Bergstrom, but we use between 20 and 30 different vineyards, and we source barrels from them. We want to try and utilize as many barrels as we can. so that they don't go to waste. This is, in my opinion, less of a cast finish and more of a secondary maturation. This juice spends an additional 12 to 18 months in these barrels. So as you guys know, usually cast finishes are only a couple of months, really. A year to a year and a half is a long time for a cast finish. So we really kind of let these guys mellow out. But yeah.
90 proof as well on this one?
They're all 90 proof except for the last one, which is a cast strength.
Yep.
So Drew, I'm not picking at you necessarily, but since Westward is an Oregon-based distillery, got to let you know it's Willamette, damn it.
I know. I thank you. Honestly, I appreciate you telling me that because it's so crazy. Even out in, even in Oregon, sometimes I hear like, it's Willamette, right?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. I live in New York, so like everybody out here, even like Psalms, will call it Willamette. It's like ingrained in my brain from like I literally worked with a master Psalm at a Michelin star restaurant. That was my last job. I was the bar director of a Michelin star restaurant in Soho. And we worked with a master Psalm on our wine program, and he called it Willamette. And I'm like happy to hear it from. Thank you. It's Willamette, right? Like, what do we think about this, guys?
This is different, right? This is to me. I told you this last time. To me, this is a raspberry bomb. Like that.
Yep. I get raspberry and plum on the nose, like right away, like that, like red stone fruit. But then also like tiny bits of like, plantain. This one's also a bit fruity, but like on the palate, it's got a distinct like sort of like, chocolate, like, yeah, bit of like sun-dried raisin. Like it's like it has a little bit of that, not exactly PX because none of that sweetness, but it has that like kind of concentrated raisin characteristic to it a bit, and also a little bit more tannic because of those oak barrels, those French oak barrels. Slightly more like grippy.
Definitely get a dry finish.
Yeah, it's a little drier, a little more grippy in the back of your palate, like a little, like almost like you would with a with a Pinot Noir.
It tastes like the red Starburst.
Yeah, I mean cherry. Yeah, dark cherry. Yeah, man. 100%. Or strawberry. I don't know which one that was.
I don't know which one it is, but like the red one.
Yeah. Red fruit. Yeah. Honestly, raspberry, strawberry, cherry, kind of all that stuff.
A little bit like one of those the fruit cups that you can get that you pop the aluminum foil off the top and you get that first whiff of the red berry and that syrupy. Yeah. And that's not the palate. The palate isn't super syrupy. It's just that experience in the nose of that syrupiness of like a fruit cup.
The palate, especially on a finish, is a little spicier, right? I mean, or is it just me? It's the finish is longer. I feel like, or maybe it's just a second sample. Okay.
I agree. Finish is longer, definitely. A little spice on the back end. I don't know personally. I don't get as much fruit on the nose as I did on the original batch. Just personally, I don't know.
Curious, Michael, do you normally associate that raspberry bomb aspect with wine casts?
No, and that's an interesting thing. Depending on which wine cask it came from, they're all different. And normally, and you guys know this, normally I stay away from wine finishes just because I it's hard to find a bourbon that's like properly done with the wine finish. You don't want to taste wine, you want to still taste bourbon, but have those characteristics. And a lot of times the wine, those tannins overpower, and it manifests itself in many different ways. Sometimes it's in the nose, sometimes it's on a palate. There was a samples we were tasting just recently. I can't recall the brand, but it was great. Like on the nose, it was great. On a palate, it was great. And then the finish became like super dry, like to the point where like it dries off your tongue, and it's just off-putting that way. So like for those reasons, I tend to stay away from the wine. But this is good, and it definitely, like the Pinot influence is definitely noticeable in the nose, at least for me. Like that's what I notice.
I think they did a great job of, they make the finish pronounced, but also manage to not lose the original expression. Yeah. Like there's still those, distinct sort of like maple vanilla waffle cone sort of that long that finish goes on forever. I mean, I have to say, I know I'm incredibly biased. This whiskey, I mean, it just has this finish that just never stops. It just keeps going. It's crazy. Like, I mean, it does have a tremendously long finish. Cool. Do you guys want to do the third?
Now we're getting into some real stuff. Not that the first
right.
two weren't.
Yeah, the first two are cool. I really like the original. I think it's pretty well balanced, but these are the ones that are, in my opinion, a little bit, let's just say, more interesting. So the third I'd like you to grab is the stout cask. So just like the Pinot, we take our original juice. That's the backbone of this guy. I don't really need to say that. You guys already know what a cask finish is. So it's going to be the original juice. We take our barrels that we've aged our original expression in, drain them, send them over to a brewery. We actually partner with a couple different breweries in the Portland area, or rather just kind of in Oregon. We use mostly Deschutes Brewing. That's the brewery we partner with the absolute most. They have a couple of dark beers they're very famous for. So we really wanted to utilize them. They're really good friends of ours. We send over our barrels to mostly Deschutes, but a couple of breweries. They fill it up with stout for about a year, depending, and release that as a special release, whatever, whiskey barrel finished stout. And then they ship our barrels back to us, and we fill them up unwashed. They're shipped back and forth whole, so they're never broken down into staves. And after the fact, they're not dried out or washed. They come back and forth from the brewery in a very short amount of time. I would say they're empty only for a couple of days before we fill them up with whiskey. So that stout is very much still sort of wet in the barrel when we fill this up again. And then same as the Pinot, spends an additional 12 to 18 months. This one actually is a slightly higher proof. It's at 92. There is a chemical process that I don't understand having to do with beer and whiskey combining that will create a bit of a cloud. And the whiskey would taste the exact same. It just would be slightly cloudy if it's not at a certain proof. So we had to up the proof a little bit in order to make sure we have this beautiful, beautiful brown liquid. I'm sure nobody's mad that it's a couple proof points higher.
Very welcome.
And this guy, man, whoo, that roasted grain, it just punches you right in the face because it's like kind of double barley just because of the beer and the whiskey.
If I didn't know better, I would say that she made this using some chocolate malt.
Oh my God, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's a chocolate cookie.
Yes, dude.
In the glass.
Yep.
That's what it is for me.
Yep. It's I mean, I get tons of chocolate, like milk chocolate, like a chocolate chip cookie. We talked about this with the tasting on Thursday. Some guy pointed it out, and boy, was he spot on. It was like, I think actually it might have been Michael. I think it was Michael, but he was like chocolate chip cookie, like, fresh out of the oven. I was like, that's funny because Miles, the guy who runs the all the blending, he describes this expression as the Maillard reaction at the bottom of a cookie fresh out of the oven, like the caramelized chocolate and like dough at the bottom of a cookie. And I get like all that chocolate, a little bit of like toasted nuts like pecans and stuff, some stone fruit, and then just coffee and tons of roasted grain. You guys nailed it with that. Like, I mean, it does taste almost like there's a chocolate rye or chocolate malt like in this whiskey. But it still has all those great baking spices.
I even get espresso from this, like a bitter espresso.
I get espresso even on the nose. Like, yeah. Ooh. This one I could sit around and sip all day, and I frequently do.
It even sits on the palate at the finish is like a stout. It's more like a stout finish than a whiskey finish. It's got like that kind of creaminess to that finish, and it just lays on your tongue and just sits there. And it's, if you just had a Guinness and a whiskey at the same time, it's like the combination of those two. But the weight of the Guinness or the weight of the stout on the tongue is what's really unique about that.
I mean, I could see this being kind of polarizing for most folks, right? Like if you feel adventurous and you want to have something very tasty but different, this is definitely it. But then again, if you're looking for more of a classical bourbon profile, this is probably not going to be for you.
It's phenomenal. But I've been on a Goose Island barrel finish stout kick lately. Man, this is just spot on. If we were going to buy a cab, I'd buy one of these before the Pinot. Just me personally.
This one's really special. I'm like, I try really hard not to pick favorites necessarily, just because, you know, I really do go back and forth day to day because I'm tasting this stuff so often. But my heart does kind of lie with this one. I mean, it's a really tough race between all the expressions, but this one's just really cool. I mean, it's just really good. Yeah, it has all the notes I like. It's literally, it's dark. It's like sort of brooding and complex. I love it. Anyway, I'm glad you guys like this one. This one's one of my favorites as well. Any other things you guys are picking up?
Drew, question: which brewery stout was this finished with again? Was it Deschutes? You said.
So mostly Deschutes. I would say about 85-90% of the barrels are exchanged between us and Deschutes. There are a couple other local breweries. I have a list somewhere that I can happily give you guys, but we do utilize like 15 different breweries. So like we use barrels, we send barrels to multiple places. So they're not always the same stout. We want to utilize these barrels as much as we can. I honestly love talking to you guys because I spend most of my days talking to folks who don't know much about distillation, aging, and things like that. And I know that y'all have a really good understanding. So yeah, you know that there's a ton of virgin barrels getting cranked out every day. And it's just a bit of a shame that not all of them are able to be reutilized. So it's kind of nice that we're able to age our whiskey, send them over to a brewery, age them again. After that, we, in case you're wondering, we don't use them again. There's no more cycling of our barrels. We'll end up probably sending them somewhere like Mexico or to the Caribbean for rum aging or tequila. But generally speaking, like, I mean, that's something I learned at a young age, that like, you know, they're when you're, especially bourbon, right? Because you're fresh barrels every time. And there's so many oak barrels floating around. It's just in my head, I'm always happy when places are able to utilize them multiple times. It's really cool when that can happen, especially within a small ecosystem like we're doing now, because it's cool that we can kind of bounce them back and forth a couple times before they get sent out in the world to be used elsewhere. Pretty cool.
There's another interesting question. And sorry, I know I'm the last bastion standing between you and a cask strength, but there's an interesting question. No Scotch distilleries buy those ASM barrels, American Single Malt barrels?
And I just saw this as well. I really wish I had an answer to this, and it will be, I mean, I just actually saw that and wrote it in my notes because I'm going to ask immediately. I can get back to you guys in the Discord because that's a really good question. I wouldn't be surprised if we do sell them overseas. That's a really good question. It seems it would make sense, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. You know, I wonder if the shipping costs might be high, or I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, just a quick comment. I've got a Rogue stouted whiskey, which if you guys are beer drinkers at all, Rogue Dead Guy Ale is really, really good. But it is super stout forward, which is kind of what Michael was saying. You don't want a whiskey that tastes like wine. That's kind of how this Rogue stouted whiskey is. What I really like about the Westward is that it has some stout tendencies, but it's not overpowering. So just to make that comment, and this Dead Guy, it's not bad, but it is just almost it takes away from the whiskey, I guess.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, just like the Pinot, I think they did a great job not losing that original expression and not making it overly beery. I had I can't even remember what it was. It was about 2 years ago. I had the same problem, right? I had something like that, like you're describing with the Rogue. It was a stout barrel finished something, and it tasted like a beer. I mean, it tasted straight up like a beer. I was like, this is good, but it's not really what I want in a whiskey. I totally understand where you're coming from. All right, should we move on to the big boy?
Mm-hmm.
You guys have all been waiting for, I'm sure. I feel like this is probably also who here loves cask strength things? I'm assuming most of y'all. Yeah, me too. Oh wait, I actually have a glass over here that's been sitting for a while.
This is how much I like it.
So I had mine sitting out for a little bit. Not necessary, really. You can pour it whenever, but it's nice to let it breathe just a little. I mean, even within tasting, me talking, it'll breathe a bit. So this guy's 125 cask strength. It is everything that I described at the very beginning of this presentation. It is our flagship expression, just not brought down to proof. It's just straight out of the barrel. We kind of there's quite a few things to this whiskey. It's pretty special. We lose like a remarkably low amount to angel share, like less than most distilleries I can think of, just because of the climate of Oregon. The temperature fluctuates enough that we get that barrel flux that we like in order to let the barrel breathe a bit. But our rickhouse doesn't really fluctuate in temperature by a crazy amount. It never drops below 45 degrees, so that aging process stays steady the whole time. And because of that low barrel flux, we're not really pushing out very much ethanol. I mean, I think it's something insanely low, like 2 or 3% is lost angel share, which is freaking crazy low.
I think Jason just alluded to it in a chat. The color alone, if you didn't even nose it, it kind of speaks to the higher proof. But like if you go back to the first one and compare the nose, like to me, and I don't know if this is the thing, but like it's more dense. It's just more robust on the nose, and I get like a ripe peach note.
So hey, quick, and I agree, Michael. But just more nose, same nose, but just more of it.
Yeah.
And more finish. But is this one that we're drinking? Is it a blend or is it a single barrel?
It is not a single barrel. It is a blend. It is a blend. It is
okay.
It's the same. It's the same as the original. About 20 barrels or so, depending on the batch. You know, our single barrel program. This one's 125.
Okay.
So it's a barrel strength, but it's not a single barrel. And it is so refreshing to talk to folks who understand what that means.
Actually, that's a good segue. Let me bring in Brad. I know you're nosing your whiskey, Brad, but I know you got a bottle of a single barrel Westward it's old packaging. And this is the bottle that was bottled specifically for New York market. That's it. That was the only market that had it. Have you had a chance to crack it open? Not yet.
I cracked it open last night with a couple friends. It is absolutely delicious.
Like, how does it compare to this blend? How does it compare to the blend? Is it much different? Because I never had a single barrel, so I don't know.
It is different. I didn't write tasting notes down, but it almost it was almost more like, I don't want to say sherry cask influence or like, but it's those types of flavor, because it obviously isn't a sherry cask, but it was those types of flavors to me more than anything that jumped out. And then, but you can still get that distillery character up front of the tropical notes, just beautiful. And it's the same thing I'm getting in this cask strength too.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry to put you.
I'd say my seal box single barrel only just a bit more fruit forward. I think it was just super. It is super fruity.
Yeah, that, if I recall correctly, that single barrel is so cool. Honestly, I don't want to harp on it too much, but you know, our single barrel program, because of that, I mean, that sweet mash process does the one thing that we do sacrifice is a touch of like consistency batch for batch. It's like kind of the primary reason people do sour mash. What that ultimately just means is a whole lot more work for our rickhouse team and our blenders to make this original one really consistent. But the benefit of that is tremendous. We get such diversity in our batches that, you know, it pretty much every single barrel, the sweet mash process matched with the, you know, the unique grain and char of every barrel and where it's placed in the rickhouse and all those special things with every single barrel. Those two processes really kind of create a crazy single barrel program. But yeah, I'm really happy you like it, man. Yeah, that one was like, I remember that one was like kind of like almost like some honeydew, like clover honey, like apricot and white peach. Like that one was cool. I have a bottle of it over there somewhere.
Yeah, it's a super fruit bomb, but it's really good, man. Really good. Really great expression. And just this, the whole line really is good. But I'm gonna tell you what, man, would I like to try a stout at Castro? Wow.
All right, let me get back to you in a second, because we'll definitely talk about the single barrel program and what's available. But I want to give a shout out to Steven's wife, actually. So first of all, yeah, hi. I don't know your name. Otherwise, I would have addressed you by your name. But first of all, I love when couples are joining this. So this is next time you guys do this, feel free to invite your favorite significant others. You know, the saying goes, you know, couples that drink bourbon together or whiskey together stay together. So that's all. Yes, she agrees. And she said that this thing, the last one, the cast strength, tastes to her like a toasted gingerbread with butter. And I totally see that. So then I wanted to give you a shout out there. Rebecca, nice to meet you. So let's talk about single barrel, because that's an interesting topic. First of all, and this was a confusion the first time we did this, every single barrel will be obviously cast strength. Those are available essentially, and Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, in 3 different options. It would be either a Pinot finish, stout finish, or just a regular cast strength, unfinished, right? So those are the 3. So John, to your point, if you wanted to do a stout one, it's available, and it would be in a cast strength, okay? Now, the question here is, and I have a little survey prepared. Actually, why don't we do this? Let me send you guys in the chat, in here, in the Zoom's chat. I'm going to put a link. Click on that link. Take 2 minutes to fill it out. There's only like a few questions there, essentially asking you to rate the expressions that you guys just had. And then there is a question about a single barrel thing. So I'll give you guys a chance to fill it out real quick. And then I'm going to share. Now, as you guys are doing it, I'll tell you this. The survey that you guys are taking is the same survey the first group took. So I kind of know where their heart lies. And I just want to know if what you guys are getting and what your preferences are kind of aligned with that group. And the plan is to then open up the survey to other people that bought the sample kit, but didn't have a chance to join us on either of those calls, and then to the bigger group. We are debating whether or not to bring Westward single barrel in. And I'm being honest, from my standpoint, from my vantage point, and I've expressed this to Drew already, it's one thing to bring a barrel of bourbon. You have a much larger base of people that drink bourbon versus American Single Malt, where while very tasty, the category doesn't enjoy as much of an appeal, I guess, and people sometimes don't know what they're missing, which is why we're doing these things to introduce people to new flavors and expand their palates. But still, when you talk about the business component of it, selling a barrel worth of single malt is difficult, is challenging. So there's another component of it is the price. And the single barrel selection would actually cost a little more. It would be a little higher than their normal ones, as it is normally at cast strength. So the price, the SRP in New York State, which is where we are, would be around $130. So that's not cheap by any stretch. But again, like is the value there for the money? I guess is the question that I'm trying to ask. So, and I know I'm putting Drew on a spot, but then again, like he's a representative for the company and he needs to know these things from the people, right? So tell me, like, give me a thumbs up in chat when you guys fill this out, and I'm going to pull up the survey right now and I'm going to share it with you.
Yeah, and honestly, while you guys are doing that too, just real fast, thank you very much for coming, for grabbing some kits, giving us a chance, and hopefully, one or two of you guys hadn't really had our product and maybe even the category itself. So I really appreciate y'all showing up, and hopefully we enlighten maybe somebody to the fact that this juice is pretty darn good.
So it would be 130. Is that what you said, Michael? The 130?
Yeah, it would be 130. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you what the stout. I mean, to me, that's wow, so good.
All right,
I'd pay 130 for that.
Okay, let me share my screen real quick, and I'll take you for the survey. Okay, so there were a few questions on the survey. First four are essentially scoring that I've asked you guys to give to each expression that we tasted today. Now, this is an aggregate between what you guys just did and the first group that did this, but I would bet a farm that it's pretty close. So on the scale 0 to 10, and again, like the way we use the scale is 5 is average, not bad, not good, just average. Anything under 5 you probably wouldn't want in your cabinet. Anything over 5 you would want, to different levels, to varying levels of how much you would want it, right? The 10 being must have. So the first one, non-cast strength, unfinished expression, received a rating of 6.6, which is pretty respectable, I would think. It's, you know, above average. The second one was Pinot, which is probably the most polarizing, just in terms of given what this group likes. And polling kind of agrees to that. It's 6.0, which was the lowest score out of all four. Somebody just clearly didn't care, but there's only one person. Most people kind of, you know, ended up in the middle. Coming in second, I should say, just in terms of popularity, was the stout one. The stout one got a score of 7.6. It's gotten some 10s. 5 people gave it a 10 rating, which is awesome. And then the most popular one was actually cast strength. Again, this is cumulative from 2 groups. The first group had about 15 or 16 people on the call, and then this group is about the same. So it's about 30 people that had a chance to fill out the survey. In terms of the money question, right? So I've asked, should we make a selection of it at 130 per bottle? Most of you said yes, which is, if I had to guess prior to the polling, I would probably say no, but I'm glad to hear you guys say yes, because to me personal, and I'm biased obviously, but the value for the money is definitely there for me. You can do a lot worse at 130, but you can also get a lot of other things at that price, and not including whiskey. So I've asked, if yes, which expression would you want? And it's a dead heat between cask, unfinished, and stout. To which I might have a very innovative and interesting solution. Why not bring both and make it available for people, right? If we do bring both, I think just chatting with some of you on Discord about this, I think people are open to buying both bottles, which is cool. And then the last question was, hey, if you aren't on board with the barrel pick, why not? And so, as I suspected, people that said no, the price is the sticking point, right? It's just too expensive. And some people actually said, you know, price to value ratio is a little off. I guess I should have asked people to elaborate a little bit, but I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. But that's the survey. Overall, like, how do you guys feel? Is this what you expected from the brand? Did it go better, worse? Like, what are your overall feelings about everything that we tasted today?
Hey, great job. I mean, great job all around. Great expressions. I think it's a bit not apples to apples when you're not tasting cask strength stout versus regular stout, regular version cask strength. So, hey, who knows? If people would have tried the cask strength stout, maybe they would have liked it better. Who knows? But anyway, I'm gonna tell you what. Cask strength stout, I'm buying. That's all I gotta say. Peace. Loved it. Good job.
Look, my favorite is unfinished one, but I can totally see how stout would be. Like, it's a close second. Like, it's like 1A and 1B situation for me.
Well, something interesting about the cask strength expression of the original. I'm not sure how many of you guys heard about that. You guys are all very big whiskey enthusiasts, so this one did win number 5. So it made top 5 on Whiskey Advocate's top 20 whiskeys of the world in 2022. It's a pretty crazy accolade for a distillery of our size. We're actually the first craft whiskey distillery to make the top 5. So it's pretty it's pretty crazy that we cracked the top 5. We really didn't think we were going to do it. So, and this was the expression that did that. So
thanks for the time. Thanks
so much. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Drew,
Well done.
Good job.
If you guys think anything, drop it in the Discord. I'm going to be checking it all the time. So if you have any questions that you want to follow up with, I'm happy to answer any and all questions. Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate that, Drew. Thank
Cheers.
you for your time.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you very much.